Okay, so this is our second lecture, which is going to look at, we're just going to look at general teaching methods. These methods can be found in any type of subject that you're teaching. The next week we shall look at specifically ICT teaching methods, but these are methods that you can use whether you're teaching ICT's content or not. So we wanted to first start with these. I'm sure because you're doing teaching methods, you must have encountered these methods that we see here. That is discussion, demonstration, inquiry, and problem solving. Not so?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we are just going to try and adopt them to an ICT context. We're going to just have some discussions on them and try to adopt them to our ICT teaching context. So we're going to start with discussion. Like I said, I'm sure you know what it means, what you've seen. You've seen this before. It's nothing new. You may know it even better than I do. But basically, when we are looking at discussion, we are basically looking at getting a subject, a topic, and basically dissecting it, turning it over, turning it upside down, and thoroughly, so that you can thoroughly understand, explain it, and then ultimately reach a conclusion. That's what discussion is. So, and discussion essentially requires more than one person speaking. So for example, now we are doing a lecture. A lecture is usually done by one person speaking and the others listen. Now you can also teach ICT in that way. It's possible. You can give a lecture in ICT. But however, when you want for a lecture that is as practical as ICT, discussion is a key point. It's a key method. And it really brings in support when you want a group of people to understand. So it requires that everybody participates. So it is an activity of sitting and talking about a specific subject. So the discussion method itself, it involves people sharing their experiences, their ideas, and their attitude. Now, when you look at this kind of teaching, you realize this kind of method of teaching, you realize that it is student-centered. If this is a method that requires people to share their ideas and experience, what this essentially means is that as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a facilitator, you're going into a classroom, whether virtual, physical, and you're saying that your students, you come in with a knowledge that your students do have some idea about what is going to be done, what is going to be taught in the classroom. So you give the students a chance, first of all, to speak out their experience, speak about their ideas, exchange these ideas, exchange their perceptions. This is essentially what attitude means, exchange their perceptions about something. Now, you may ask yourselves, why would people want to discuss anything about computers and mobile phones and programming? What is the point of it all? Because when we look at technology, you realized in the very first lecture we had, when we look at technology, we automatically assume that this is an object and there's no position where it is concerned. No, that is not necessarily true. Everybody, first of all, has an attitude towards technology. They have feelings about it. They have fears, they have great passions, they have whatever it is, and they need to discuss it. Then there may be also some misconceptions about what ICT is and what they're expecting. I'll give you an example. The years that I taught in the IT department, many times when I was teaching purely IT students, whenever they came to the very first time they came into any IT class, their assumption was they were going to be taught computer literacy, which is not the case, because computer literacy is taught to everyone. And you find a person like that would have a misconception of what IT is. So that is a typical example. Then experiences. You'd be surprised how much experience people have when it comes to ICT. Many times when I was teaching, for example, programming, I had students, especially when it came to web programming, I had students who came to my class simply out of respect because they had to attend a class. But they already knew so much about web programming, they had already taught themselves. And so you should never assume that students don't know, they have zero knowledge. You'll be surprised at what they have. So something like a discussion would be a good time to find out what people think about what they're going to be taught, what ideas they have, and what attitudes they have. But discussions must be also done in an orderly manner. Like any discussion, if you're in a social setting and you're sitting down having a conversation with friends, with colleagues, things can tend to go out of hand. There are some people who have strong characters and they speak out. And then there are others who are quite timid. There are others, some who may have a strong opinion on something. So whatever the case, it must be ordered. So you as a teacher, as a lecturer, you must understand, if you're going to use this method, there must be an orderly fashion in which thoughts have to be expressed. So discussion, as we said, involves more than one person speaking. So it's a two-way conversation between participants. So by two-way, what do I mean? Let's say we are in a discussion group. I may speak. Then after that, I may speak to all of you. After that, maybe Andrew will respond to what I've said. Then Sylvia may respond to what Andrew has said, and so on and so forth. So it is a question of a communication being made, then responses are being made to that particular communication. Then in other points, a new topic may be brought out. So in the classroom, everyone participates, including the teacher. So the students plus the teacher participate. Now, in situations, of course, where you have large classes, you may want to divide your discussions into groups so that you allow full participation of every single person. Now, it is important that the teacher spends time to listen to what the students are trying to say. It is important the teacher doesn't interfere, because this is the teacher already has come with their knowledge, but we want the students to come out and bring out their points of discussion. Now, you would consider that the discussion, sorry, somebody needs to mute. Flavia, could you please mute? Thank you. So, a class would be considered active if you're seeing the students participating more than the lecturer. It is supposed to be more an active learning experience. So when would we call a discussion when would we say that a discussion method has actually participated? So one, we would see that there is maximum participation, especially from the students. That is one. Two, students have an opportunity to criticize and evaluate. Now, this one is a key point. Most of the time when we speak, we don't want to be criticized, and we also don't want to be seen to criticize. However, there are certain key points as a facilitator, as a teacher, that you need to understand. To criticize does not mean to bring down the other person. No, it is to objectively ask if something it was not clear, or to objectively state another point of view without necessarily bringing down the other person. Here, I would like to just give you an example. I gave it, I think, to one class. I don't know if it was you. I've been teaching so many classes, so sometimes I forget. When I was doing my research, I remember I was particularly scared what my supervisor and the co-supervisor would say about my work. And most of the time, I was scared of bringing the work forward. But what happened by me not bringing it forward was that I kept repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Until one time I decided, okay, let me listen critically to what my supervisor said. And specifically, I didn't want to hand it over because I was scared that, they would find my work stupid or things like that. But then I began to listen to how my supervisor asked questions. He would ask me, why did you write this? Why did you not write this? What's the meaning of this? Then by asking those questions, I realized that I wasn't bringing my point out clearly. And once I began to listen critically to what they were saying, my work improved a great deal. So one of the things that you as a teacher must do is to educate your students to learn to criticize and evaluate objectively, not with the intention of bringing down people. Now, many times, however, it's a challenge when you're dealing especially with younger generation. For example, I've seen it a lot with undergraduate students as opposed to masters, where criticisms can tend to almost bring down the other person. And with that, it prevents others from speaking out, and which therefore presents maximum participation. So number one is probably before a discussion, have rules of engagement, or terms of how exactly are we going to conduct this, in what manner, what is considered constructive criticism, what is considered just being disrespectful. So this is where you have logical and meaningful criticism should be accepted. And where something is not logical, meaningful, as a teacher, you can say, no, we shall disregard that because maybe the way the person brought it out, or it's meant to put down another person. Then students should anchor the discussions themselves. That means you can allow the students to actually manage themselves as they discuss, and you can choose leaders among them. Keeping teachers as a guide. Then select the topic only with the help of the students. That is, the students themselves, it would be good if they can pinpoint areas where they feel they can put in a contribution. So some of the things I had said earlier, if the class is too big, divide the class into different groups and give them topics of discussion. Every group has a leader to anchor. Then students have leadership qualities should be selected for anchoring. So now the students who have leadership qualities, when you choose them to anchor, one of the things you do is that you make room for others to speak. Because when the one who has leadership qualities is anchoring, normally if they are not given that position, they tend to overpower because they want to lead the discussion according to what they know. But if they are now the ones keeping control, which means they are given less opportunity to actually give a contribution, and therefore they are giving chance to those who may not have otherwise have spoken because maybe they are timid, or they are a bit shy, or for any other reason. Pick topics that are relevant, topics that can easily be discussed by people, by the type of students that you have. So take an example. I wouldn't bring, let's say, talking about PhD research to your particular group of students. Why? Because you're yet even to do your undergraduate, graduate research. Leave aside the master's research. So that would be an irrelevant topic. But a relevant topic are things that the students should have experienced within their lifetime. Take an example, if you're going to have a discussion in ICT, maybe the first discussion would be, what ICT device do you know? What applications do you know on that device? You know, things like that, because everyone by now has encountered ICT. Why? Because we have all used phones. At minimum, everybody has used a mobile phone, be it a smartphone or a featured phone. That is the bottom line. Then from the discussions, the lecturer, the teacher draws a conclusion with the help of the leaders, because the leaders would have kept record of what had been discussed. So we have different types of discussions. We have the small, we're going to go through each of them, but these are the basic three: the small group discussion technique, socialized classroom, and panel discussion technique. So the small group discussion is typically as what you see on the image here on this slide, where you divide up your classes into smaller groups, and they are given a topic, and they go through that topic discussing, given the previous rules that I've just given you. So this style is very good, especially if you have a topic that you know that everyone can make a contribution to within your class. So you first of all, you need to know the type of class that you do have, the type of questions that you can ask them. What do I mean? I teach a master's class in ICT. And usually these are ICT professionals, people who are working in certain organizations as head ICTs or head the ICT department. So being in such a class, I know if I ask anything to do with management of ICT, these people have had some experience. But I wouldn't pose the same question to an undergraduate IT student. As much as both are IT professionals or are training to be in IT professionals, those in undergraduate classes wouldn't be able to discuss such a topic. So for you as a teacher, you'd use this method if you know that you are going to put forward a topic where everybody can make a contribution. Then you have the socialized classroom discussion. So this one works very well, as you see in the image, like the entire classroom sits down on a round table and discusses something. So this would be very good if, first of all, you have a small classroom which can afford everyone to sit together and discuss something. And you know that others are not going to overpower other members of the group. So this one would be extremely good. Then you have the panel discussion. Now, as you see here in the image, we have our panel at one end of the room, and then the entire class is listening. So now this kind of the panel discussion is when you have a group of people who are particularly good at a certain topic, which your classroom may not be good at. And you bring forward these individuals to discuss something and thoroughly discuss it, so that by the time the students leave that panel discussion, number one, they would have heard what was being discussed. Number two, they would have also had time to ask questions to the panel members on the topic that has been discussed. So this is an extremely good technique if you have a given topic, which may not be, your class members may not be thoroughly conversant with. So here I would maybe give an example. If you got older students from a higher class who had gone through certain topic, and they can come in and give a discussion and discuss something for the younger group. Or if it's possible, you can also bring even a panel of experts from the field if that is possible for you. Now, the discussion method to be used, it must be used appropriately. Like any tool, a method is a technique, it's a tool. It must be used appropriately so that you can achieve the results that you want. So one, we use the discussion methods when you know the students have some knowledge or experience about the topic that is being covered. That is a key point. They should have some knowledge or experience. So that discussion itself is one, to allow them to air out what they do know, to pick from others what they may know, and for them they may not know. And then three, also guides the teacher or the lecturer to know what to add on where the students may fall short. So in this subject, I think practically all subjects apart from mathematics, art, music, and dance can use the discussion method. So guess what? Even ICT can also use the discussion method. We shall see, we shall brainstorm on that in a little while. So the discussion method may be used to follow a lecture to help trainees apply what they have been learning. So these methods we are saying is that that we are bringing forward. We are not saying that as you're teaching, you're going to use one method alone. You can use one or more of these methods. Or sorry, you can use more than one, not necessarily one method alone. So why use the discussion methods? One, it supports thinking and communication powers. One is able to think about what they know and then articulate it clearly to others. It also helps produce leadership skills. The thinking and communication powers goes away with expression ability. Problem-solving ability, although we have the problem-solving method, but discussion method also brings about problem-solving abilities, creativity, and motivation. But we also have some disadvantages that come with the discussion method. One, we had mentioned this earlier, it is possible that some students may dominate the discussion. So this is where it is important, when you see that person who is dominating, you can actually give that person a role as a teacher so that you lessen the time this person speaks. Then there's also a situation where you may initiate a discussion, but you may have misread your students in that they may not be, not all your students may be aware of something. And this is typically common with ICT. We may assume that everybody has encountered ICT, but that may not be the case. It's possible for students to meet students who have never seen a mobile phone. That is possible. It's very possible to find students who have never seen a computer, or they may have seen it, but have never used it. So depending on the topic, you may misfire at a certain point. It is definitely time consuming. Unlike now, for example, the lecture method where one person is talking and others are simply listening. It is not adaptable to all teaching and learning situations. That is true. So it's not an all-encompassing method, which all methods are in actual sense. Now, in some discussions, this last point on this slide, where it says it may degenerate into inappropriate topics. This is where it is key that the teacher is always present during discussions to ensure that things are brought back to the norm, especially when you're dealing with younger people. They may tend to move off topic. So just here are a few points to guide you on how you can use the discussion method. So the discussion session can be led by the instructor, and it can take place in groups. So one, you can start by dividing your class into groups. Then set goals of lesson objectives. Once you set objectives, that means you pick a relevant topic that everyone may have personal experience. Make sure that everybody contributes their personal ideas, contributes ideas or personal opinions on something. Then after the discussion, ensure that it is applied to a familiar or existing problem. Then everyone must be able to express what has been learned. So these are all key points to ensure that you have a good discussion. Now, let us start by we are going to try and use Padlet and just have a small discussion on using the discussion method in programming. I think some of you, when in our first meeting, we said you articulated that you're going to focus on programming, that is software programming. So let us focus our mindset on programming. I want us to have, using Padlet, to go through these 3 questions. If you're to teach programming, what are the learning objectives or aims? Where can we use the discussion method? And then can we just brainstorm on what activities we would plan to use this during a discussion? So briefly, I'm just going to copy to you a link to Padlet. Let me see if I can. I'm going to copy this link and send it to you via the chat. So give me a minute. So if we can all go there and we make a contribution. So my first question will be, this is software programming, or let me say software development. Learning objectives. We are teaching software development. What objectives would we want? So can you just make a contribution there? For those who may not know what software development is, basically software development, or rather programming, when we are teaching programming. When we teach programming, we're essentially teaching students how to come up with applications, that is softwares that are going to run on certain devices. So take an example. Somebody wrote Microsoft Word. That is an application. Somebody wrote Microsoft Excel. I may also decide to write another program, maybe which collects students' marks and calculates them. That is, I can use software programming to do that. So now if I'm going to teach programming, what would be our learning objectives? Let's just use Padlet. Contributions, everyone?
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
I'm trying to click, but like I think it's not coming, like to write.
Mm,
The cursor is not coming out.
maybe I send you an email. But no, before it worked. There was a time we used this. Is it the same for everyone? Are you failing? Was that Sylvia who said who's failing?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. Did you, you're not getting, you mean like, for example, do you see the window I have open here where my mouse is moving with the hand? You're saying for yours it's not?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So for
I'm trying to click.
And it's nothing is happening.
Madam.
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm trying to click.
Hey, then could it be a problem? For the others, are you failing also? John, Andrew, Flavia.
I'm also unable to do it. I don't know whether it is a default by all.
Okay, let me send you emails. Can you give me your emails?
Student mails.
Any.
Nakato.slivia.
Nakato.slivia
at stud.
.umu.ac.ug. Then another person.
Tomorrow was a .andrew.
Andrew. At stud.umu.ac.ug. Another person, Flavia.
Nanono.flavia@stud.com.
Flavia at sorry, at what?
At stud.
.umu.ac.ug. Okay. I don't know if you can. I don't know if there's anything has been sent to your emails. I'm surprised why it's not opening, because here on mine it opens without a problem. Has anything been sent to your emails? Yes, to send myself to my home email. Yeah, I think you've all been sent. You've all been sent a link in your emails. Andrew, I see you're having network problems, but let's wait for you.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please, Sylvia.
I'm not seeing any mail. I'm not seeing any mail, madam.
Let me see if I spelled your name right.
Okay.
Nakato, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, madam.
Is this right,
Nakato.
Nakato?
Yeah, it's okay.
At stud.umu.ac.ug. I've resent.
Let me see. Still, I'm seeing nothing.
Andrew, did you see anything? Sylvia, I spelled the name Sylvia as Sylvia. Is that okay?
Sylvia, no,
It's not.
it's missing I between L and V.
Okay.
Oh, so sorry.
Let me see. Nakato.
That's Sylvia. Yeah. Yeah. Received, madam.
Okay. So if we could all make some contributions, let me see, there's a chat here. Flavia is saying your mail is still loading. Let's wait for you. However, in the meantime, as all of you load, maybe Flavia, you can tell us what learning objectives do you see in programming or software development?
Okay, madam. By the end of the lesson, the learners should be able to identify the programming language to be used, and the learners should be able to write simple programs and later to develop a real active program, as in a working program.
So Flavia, you said they should be able to identify
the programming language to be used, like Java, oriented programming languages, and they should be able to write simple programs and later make them real programs, as in working programs, programs which can work.
and then you said They should be able to write simple programs and then
Yes.
deploy them.
Yes.
Mhm. This is Flavia's contribution.
Hello.
Yes, please.
On the other hand, I would say uh, basing on the given topic, the learning objectives would be by the end of the lesson, a learner would be able to first define the term software development,
Define, maybe, yeah, define concepts. Let's say define concepts.
then classify the languages that are being used,
Mm-hmm.
then give the brief background of those background or the historical background of the languages,
Mm-hmm.
and later identify the applications of those languages.
Identify
The application of the languages.
application of languages. Okay. Mm-hmm. Next, Sylvia, can you write or I put your contribution directly?
I have already posted something, madam, but you've indicated Flavia.
Oh, sorry. This was you. Sorry.
Yes.
This is Sylvia. Sorry. Okay. Okay, thank you. So Sylvia says at the end of the lesson, learners should be able to define programming. And the end of the lesson, learners should be able to run different programs. Okay. All of you have really given me some really good objectives. One, I can see that you have a theoretical component and then you have a practical component. Yeah. So all those are key points. All those are key points. And another point which I can also give you is apart from writing programs, you can write that, as Flavia says, we have the simple programs that we can have. One should be able to write simple programs. But as time goes on, especially as you go through programming, you realize that programs, you start with when you're learning IT, you start with the simple things like web design, which where you do a simple web page. Then later on, you come to PHP, which is the programming behind websites. Then you have the software programming where you have things like C or C++, where you may write simple programs. Then you come to programs like Java. So Java allows you to write the simple programs and to write even those which become more and more complex. And then there's also what we call the design element that comes in. So the design element, it's a skill that is being learned, but it's more or less starts from a theoretical background coming into the practical background. Now you realize for all of these, I'm just going to add for me as Sheba. I'm going to write design programs, because writing them and designing them are two different things. Yeah. and it's a key point to design programs. Now, where can we apply the discussion method here?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, basing on the objectives that I stated, I may also use the discussion method on the classifying languages that are being used in software development.
Okay. You may use classifying. Now, if why would you use it on that particular section?
For example, looking at the first objective that I stated, briefly I can use the brainstorming part of it to define the key concept and key terminologies. Then later, basing on the nature of that part or classifying languages, my, my intended objective is to bring these learners on board to have more abstract ideas on how those different languages can be used after when they make some research here and there.
Okay. Now you realize you can actually you're right. It's possible, but you realize that especially for programming, because it's fairly new, you need to know if your students know something, or you could actually first give a small lecture and then give some guiding questions. Then students go and research. Then they come back and discuss in groups. Something like this, classifying programming languages. Because for many people, it's a new subject. So it's not something that you can easily relate from your experience per se. So it may not be something that can be easily discussed, but you may, as a teacher, you may need to first give maybe some research work, some hints of questions. Students go and read. Then when they come into a discussion, they discuss something thoroughly. Sylvia, where would you recommend? Sylvia?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, where would you recommend you use the discussion method basing on your objectives, learning objectives?
Let me see. Let me first think about it, madam.
Okay. And Flavia?
Yes, madam. Relating to my learning objectives, like writing the programs, I can create small groups. Then I make students in smaller groups and I instruct them to discuss some ideas on how to write a certain program, and everyone brings the idea so that they can come up with one written program.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, madam.
That is possible. Although maybe would you say would it be the writing? Because
Yes, writing.
because writing the program itself is a very practical skill. It would be a practical skill. So that one, I don't know if a discussion would be,
Yes,
unless
madam.
the program itself requires one to go through maybe some complex algorithm where students need to discuss and find out how to come up with that algorithm, then write it in a program. I think
Excuse
that,
me.
yes, please.
I would think that for the case of Flavia, maybe as an instructor, you would first borrow an idea of first you demonstrate on what the learners
Yes,
should do, then later you can assign them those small groups
yes,
because it is really much of practical. So the
yes,
best way would first you demonstrate what the learners you intend to do, then later you can assign those small groups. There you
yes,
can achieve the discussion method.
yes. And especially when a program requires design here, when there are the small little programs that we write. For example, I remember when I was teaching programming, things like Hello Java. That one is a simple one. You can give a demonstration and students write. Or a small one, ASCII, a small Java program which requires somebody to input a number and the program gives a response, something like that. Those are simple programs. But if you have something complex, maybe something that requires a complex algorithm, and you don't give them the answer immediately. For example, if you ask them to write a program which picks a certain number of marks from a set and then calculates them and pulls out the middle number and then selects maybe the lowest number and the highest number, and you want these students to work out the algorithm, they can first go through a design process if they have been taught how to write a small algorithm, and now you've given them a new one. Just as Andrew was saying, you've given them something as a demonstration, but then you've given them a new algorithm and you want them to discuss it and then implement it afterwards. Then that a discussion would be good. There are other programs that people write which may be a little bit more advanced here when we talk about designing programs. Take an example, if you want someone to write a software program that does a bit more. For example, in Java, we have object-oriented programming, which can even create interfaces. Maybe you have a menu interface where students come in and a user comes in and selects their option, what they want to do. And that kind of program, to write it, you need people to sit down and figure out how will it look like. Okay, now after it looks like this, what will be our classes? What will be the classes that exist in this? So essentially that process of discussion where they decide how their program should look like, what classes are going to exist in this program, which will be the blueprint, which class will be the application, and so on and so forth, which class will inherit from another, which will be the parent, which will be the child, what will be the inherited attributes, and so on and so forth. That design process, people can sit down and discuss it. So we can already see some of the things where a group discussion can come in. But we can also tell where we need to prepare certain things so that, like Andrew was saying, in one case, you may need to have a demonstration and then afterwards give a discussion for people to go ahead and discuss. In other cases, you may have to give some materials. Now, for example, if it's designing a program, you may give somebody a description that this is what you want done, and the students go through it. But of course, they must have done some level of design. They must have been taken through design processes, or you've given them some specific topics, and they go out and they go and research in the library and come back and give a discussion. So those are just some samples. Okay, let's quickly go to demonstration method. So this is already Andrew preempted it. So this one is, as the name implies, the teacher essentially organizes something to demonstrate to a group of students. Or the teacher can actually assign a student or a group of students to come and demonstrate something, and then others observe. Now, it would also be interesting if you gave different groups in your class different areas to go and research on something. Then they come and give a demonstration. So the one who is demonstrating must be more knowledgeable than the ones who they are being demonstrated to. So demonstration can be verbal, it can be live. Either way, there must be some kind of, it can be by speech or by visual effect, but you can also combine the two. So one, how do we prepare for it? Just like the discussion method, where we had some things that needed to be in place for us to have a discussion. So also is the demonstration method. One, the demonstrators must be well selected. So these must be skilled in operating certain equipment, or they must be skilled in certain areas. So like I said, sometimes you're teaching, you may be teaching something where some students know and others don't know. I gave you the example when I was teaching web development, and there were some students who were really, really very good. Those can give a demonstration to others. And sometimes people speak better to their peers than even the lecturer. The lecturer may come in with maybe their technical terms, yet this person, the fellow student, may be able to speak at a better language. But also, it also helps the person demonstrating to become more grounded in their knowledge, because before they demonstrate, they must go through what they are teaching, what they are going to demonstrate to others. What do I mean? Whenever I'm coming to teach, or as teachers, you know you need to prepare. So the person who is demonstrating, this gives them an opportunity to go ahead and give a proper demonstration. Another important thing is to make sure that whatever it is you're going to use to demonstrate works. So a day before, even just before the class, first test that what you're going to demonstrate actually works. Now, especially in IT, I've taught for the number of years I taught, there were times when I would try out a piece of software. Maybe I tried it out last year. Then I taught other courses. Then I came to class to teach, and it doesn't work. Those situations happen. So ensure that you always test out what you're going to demonstrate, either day before or before the class, to ensure that it works. So you must try it out several times, that you make sure that things work accurately. Then motivate your observers. One of the ways to motivate them is to ensure that there's going to be, let's say, asking them to repeat what has been done, so that students know they must pay attention. Because there's a tendency to lax when knowing that, oh, the teacher or this person is going to demonstrate this, the work is all on them. But if they know they'll be asked to replicate what has been done, or there has to be a quiz afterwards, then you ensure that you motivate those who are observing to pay attention, to be active and concentrate. Ensure that everyone has complete view of what it is you're going to demonstrate. Make sure that everybody can see what is being demonstrated. And as you go on, have questions to ensure that your students are keeping attention of what you're doing and saying. So take an example. When I prepare my lecture, I ensure after every discussion, every method, we have a discussion to ensure that we are together at every point in time. Now, during the discussion itself, make sure that there are no disruptions, things that will take up the attention of the observers. That includes you yourself, how you come and present yourself, being mentally and physically alert. If you have certain delicate steps, take extreme care that you don't have mishaps in between. This can cause quite a bit of disruption in keeping attention. You should also allow students to take notes or record some data while things are being demonstrated. So take an example. Now we have a lecture. We should be able to record ourselves so that later on we can go back to what we learned. After the demonstrations, Allow for questions to come in, but then also have your own questions to ensure that students were following up. So then also have a summary. Have a summary of what has been undertaken, and you can actually ask somebody to give that summary. Then also have an oral evaluation or performance test, just to ensure that everyone did pay attention. The advantages with the demonstration method is that if there is something that is required to go through a systematic procedure, take an example. We talked about Flavia's example of writing a program. Writing a program is really procedural. We know that there are specific steps that must be taken, whatever the programming language. If I give you the example of Java, it is a programming language I've taught for some years. It's very precise, the way you start the writing the small program, to the way you start it, to the way we end it. The header of the program, the body, the ending of each statement. There are certain predefined methods that must be used. All those are systematic and they are procedure, and you can't do without them. It is not the same thing as writing an essay, although even writing an essay has a certain procedure. But rules may change here and there, but with programming, but anyway, I think with all languages, whether it is spoken language or a language that is for machines, they have their laws and procedures. So there must be a demonstration before anything else can be done. So demonstration is a very important method when it comes to things like programming. The same thing goes for other things like, let's say, if you're teaching something like computer literacy. There's only one way of starting a computer and shutting it down. Okay, there may be two ways, but the recommended way of shutting it down is primarily one. So just some of those things will need demonstration. If you have expensive equipment or machines that must be minimized or maximized, take an example of those who are learning networking and they're doing things like Cisco or any networking course. You may need to access something like high-powered switches, which not everyone can access. So a demonstration is a good idea. Then you also avoid wasting time and effort if a demonstration can be done. So take the example of programming or something as simple as computer literacy. If you want to teach everyone how to switch on and switch off a computer, you can have one demonstration and then students do it after that. They do it by themselves after that, especially if it is recorded. That can be helpful. The other advantage with demonstration is that you know something works. By the time you carry out a demonstration, you're sure it works. Sometimes, take an example, if you're writing a new algorithm, there you may have trial and error. You may need people to discuss and test this and test that and do this and the other. But if you have already something that is working, which demonstrates how a piece of software goes through an algorithm, you probably need something that you've already worked out. Then you also know that your findings are accurate and reliable because you have something that works. Disadvantage, it is time consuming, just like discussion method. It is time consuming. However, you must outweigh the benefits and costs. If a demonstration method is more effective than, take an example as a lecture, then go for it. Communication barriers may arise because it is one person communicating to several people. This is the same thing as a lecture. A lecturer comes up, I start speaking, my accent may be off, my behavior may be off at a certain point, and I may lose you. My connection may go down, and I will lose you. So the same thing can happen with demonstration. It becomes a failure if you have a great number of students, especially if the students are not able to view what is being demonstrated or hear clearly what is being demonstrated. So the less number of students you have, the better it is. It needs a skilled instructor. So now here, in case you have somebody else other than you giving the demonstration, you may bring in somebody who may be skilled at a certain thing, but not skilled at communication. I'll give an example. There was a time when we were starting to learn, when we as lecturers were being taught how to teach online. At a certain point, they enlisted somebody from the ICT department to demonstrate how to use Moodle. But this person, being an ICT person, this is typical of ITP people. They are not good communicators. They are not good instructors. Why? Because ICT personnel normally spend most of their time in front of computers or in front of devices, trying to configure that, fix this and fix that. They are not very good communicators. So I remember when he was brought in, most people couldn't hear what he was saying because he simply wasn't a good communicator, good instructor. He was very good with the system, but not very good at teaching others how to use it. So now if we can just go through the demonstration method and brainstorm again, we can use the same Padlet. Just brainstorm on computer literacy. If we can just head back there and think of some learning objectives for computer literacy. What learning objectives can we think of? What learning objectives can we think of, and where can we use the demonstration method? Sylvia says tests.
Hello, madam.
Pardon?
Hello, this is Flavia.
Yes, Flavia.
Like in a computer literacy, if I'm to teach practicals like Word, the demonstration method can work in
Okay,
a way
what
that
is?
I can demonstrate to students how to type in Word, broad, save, insert,
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that one is a good one. That one is a good one, Flavia. Sylvia, Andrew.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, basing on the computer literacy.
Mm.
So one of the key objectives I may intend the learners to have is first of all to identify basic terms, concepts, and functions of the computer components, and then classify the hardware components together with the related software components as well. So here, the demonstration method can be used by classifying different hardware components to the
Okay.
learners. For example, if I can touch the keyboard and I demonstrate this is a keyboard and this is how it operates, I look at the mouse, even the entire system, Even I can go an extra mile and they open the computer system. I also penetrate much the motherboard and the rest how they can be
Yes.
fixed up. Mm.
Yeah, that one is very good. And especially if you have a class where you may not have that many computers for everybody to come and open it up, things like that. Those are very good ideas. Thank you very much. Let's just get back. So the next method is the inquiry method. So basically this one is allowing students to go out and learn by themselves. It kind of becomes spontaneous and self-directed exploration. The idea behind it is that if you ask somebody to go out and find out, they will understand more than if they are told. That is the idea behind it. So what is inquiry? Well, inquiry requires investigation, observing, analyzing, interpreting, predicting, proposing, concluding, and communicating. All these ones. Now, if you see this basically speaks about research itself. It's sort of like referring to research itself. So you can't have different types of inquiry. So it can be open inquiry where students propose and pursue their own question. This sounds almost like research, where somebody is expected to come up with their own research problem and research question, and then go ahead to answer that research question. Then it can be guided. This is where the method is not determined. The question is determined, but the method is not determined. So the student is given a problem, and the students go ahead and determine how to solve that problem. Then the third one is structured, where you may give the student the problem and the method, but the answer is not definite. So the student is the one to come up with a definite answer. Then we have the limited inquiry. So this is typically what we find in traditional labs. For example, when you do things like litmus tests and so on and so forth, the answer, you already know where the answer is coming from. What you know what the answer is going to be, but simply for the student to see it being done. So these are the different types of inquiry. So as we've seen, the source of inquiry can be the teacher or it can be the student. It can go either way, depending on what it is that you want to be discovered. It can be either way. So whatever the model, whether it's the teacher or the student, it can be either way. The advantages of inquiry: one, it is authentic. So the student is the one getting the first-hand experience of experiencing a phenomenon and understanding it in its environment. It emphasizes the process of gathering and processing of information. So unlike a situation where the teacher gathers the information, processes it, and then gives predefined conclusions, which may be based on his or her conceptions, attitude, and preconceptions.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
I have not understood the first point, madam. I beg your pardon.
The first point of first-hand experience.
Yes.
Okay. Let me give you the example of research. When you go out to do your research, it will be Sylvia who will be going to find out her research. It will not be your supervisor. It will be Sylvia. The findings will be done. It will be Sylvia to determine what he or she is going to go out and try to discover. It will be Sylvia to determine what questions she's going to ask. Yes, that the supervisor will guide you and say, maybe this question is vague, this topic is too narrow, expand to this, consider this, and all of that. But ultimately, everything comes from Sylvia. When Sylvia goes and collects that information, Sylvia is going to process it. And then Sylvia is going to come and present to the world, this is what I have found. So the ideas are essentially, the ideas, the thinking are coming from Sylvia, not your supervisor, but Sylvia. I'll give you another example. Now, this is a practical example that I had for my research. When I was doing my research, I went out to discover something in a rural context, ICT in a rural context. And I came back to report. Initially, I was very scared, but I remember my supervisor telling me that all the things you're saying are very strange to us, especially us who are from the Western world. In other words, for me to report to this group of professors who are mostly Europeans, telling them about rural poverty, telling them about mobile phone illiteracy. These were things they knew nothing about. And it made my research authentic in the sense that truly I went out and discovered something that they themselves had no experience about and presented it. It was my information. Now I was presenting it in an authentic manner. Now, what do I mean by something being authentic? That it's being now learned by the student. What do I mean? Whatever it is we learn, it is affected by our perceptions. Whatever it is we're going out to learn, it is affected by our personal perceptions. Take an example. If I have an attitude of tribalism, and I go out to go and read something, let's say about a tribe which I have negative feeling towards, yeah? Let's take an example. Okay, I'm Mtoro, but imagine I'm from another tribe and I have a negative perception of Batoro, and I'm going to go and read something about them. My negative perception will come out with what I come out as a conclusion. Now, if I am going to teach others, I'm going to impart that negativity upon them, because when I'm going to teach you, I want you to believe what I believe. Do you understand what I'm saying? I want you to believe what I believe. Now, as a teacher, I can very easily sway you. But if it is a student, that student is getting information firsthand, not being, you may not be swayed by other people, especially the teacher. Now, this one is very good if you have certain things that don't need the perception of the teacher to be swayed, to sway others. There are certain things which are set in stone, which you can't change. Take an example. We know switching on a computer is the best, the recommended way is one way. Then there are unrecommended ways of switching off a computer. So those are set in stone, you can't change them. But let us say we are talking about designing a program. Let's say you ask students to write a software application for the registry department. You ask the students, go and find out how the registry department runs. Now, maybe me, the teacher, if it were me to come and tell you how that registry department runs, maybe I have a grudge with the registry department. Maybe I quarreled with them. I may decide to tell you, this registry department, they're very corrupt. They do things in a fake way. They are shoddy with their work. They are lazy. They are incompetent, and so on and so forth. Therefore, they need a system which makes them more competent, which will maybe catch them when they are doing something wrong. There, I'm giving you my perception. I'm giving you my bias. Unlike if it was an objective, a student who has no connection, goes there and actually finds out and reports back. That is what we refer to as first-hand experience. Yeah, you're going to go and discover a phenomenon. That's what the word phenomenon means. It means an occurrence, something that is happening. in a certain space and time. Do you understand, Sylvia?
Yes, madam.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So the inquiry approach gives some level of freedom, but there must always be guidance from the teacher, especially when it comes to the scientific methods having to be followed, searching for information correctly and presenting it correctly. The inquiry method produces a great sense of responsibility, a deep sense of responsibility in the learners. Why? Because one, they have to report back whatever it is they have gone out to discover. So bringing something that is untrue or inaccurate reflects badly on them. When you're doing research, one of the key things they will tell you is that try to be as objective and as accurate as possible. Even if you don't believe in something, if it is found there, if you find it in your case research, report it as is. That is important. The fact that you're allowing learners to discover and discover their own facts without necessarily influencing them is key. It's really important. Why? Because then the learner retains this as a principle and knows that this is something that is true because they've discovered it themselves. Then it builds a sense of confidence, especially when they experience success. It also increases the intellectual capabilities of students, of the learners especially, because the students become critical. They have to learn to process things and present them accurately. Disadvantages: when you don't have enough resources to carry out inquiry, time, and then classroom management. The scientific knowledge is extremely important when you're carrying out this inquiry method. The research is a key point. Research is basically science. One must know what it is they are going to discover, how they are going to discover it, and how to process and present their data. All these are key points. So how would you facilitate inquiry in teaching? First of all, you must have an ideal room setting. That means you must have, essentially, you must have an environment, not necessarily the classroom, but you must have an environment that allows inquiry. Your learners must have somewhere to go to find information. For example, they must have an easily accessible library. That is a key point. Choose tools and equipment that can be easily manipulated. Materials to be examined must lend themselves easily to the process. That is basically creating your ideal room. The questions and problems to be answered must originate from the learners, not from the teacher. The teacher may guide, even when it is a structured or guided inquiry. The teacher can more or less allow the student to be guided. Just a key point here, imagine when you're doing your research, your supervisor decides to give you the topic, the research questions, and so on and so forth. You're going to have minimum motivation for doing it because you're basically doing somebody else's research. And inquiry really should come from the learner, not from the teacher. The procedure should be planned. This is where the scientific process comes through. When you're learning about research, you take several steps. You're taught research methods. Then you're asked to come up with a concept paper. Then after that, you're asked to come up with a proposal. Then once your proposal is accepted, you go into the field, you get your data, you process, then you begin writing. All of that is a planned process. So likewise, even in the minimal, if you have a small section of inquiry within your teaching and learning, ensure that you have a planned activities. If you have questions that need to be, the students need to go and inquire about, you really should have a set of activities that must be done to ensure that every step of the way the students are following through. The completion of each of these activities must be evaluated. So take an example. You have a situation where you ask the students to come up with a problem which needs to be inquired. Then you also, the students go ahead and come up with that research problem and they evaluate it. You can do this in groups. You can do this as a lecturer. You can do it in a panel, whatever it is, evaluate. Each step should be evaluated. So we can have the same discussion on our website, but I think we just have a few minutes to the end of our lecture. We can go through the same, you can simply go through it in your own time and just go through inquiry, the inquiry method and website development. However, that said, I want us now to go to our first assignment that I've put up, which is based on this, this particular session we've had. This is already up in Moodle, and it's basing on this particular session. From our group, I noticed that we are 9. Is this true? We are actually 9?
We are 7.
Yes, please. Are we 9 in this class? 9 students, that is. I know, including myself, we are 10. But are we 9?
We are 8.
8. Okay.
Yes.
Now, that means you can come up with groups, 2 groups, 4 members, and go ahead and do this assignment. So here I've left it quite open. I've said in these groups, I can generate the groups randomly, but that means, but either way, all your members must also enroll in this, because you need to submit this as a group, and I mark it as a group. One, we have basically looked at ICT, and we are saying that ICT is generally considered to be a practical teaching subject. However, even as we've discussed, we've gone through the different teaching methods, we realize that we can apply different sections of any subject in ICT to these general teaching methods. Now, I'm going to ask you to get into those groups of 4. Pick any of these. Maybe it's computer literacy, programming, website development, networking, computer maintenance, etc. Wherever you feel you want to take concentration as a group. Now, in the group, select that subject, narrow down to a topic in that subject. Create a lesson plan that will use 2 of the general teaching methods. In the introduction of your lesson plan, please justify why you're using the selected teaching method as opposed to others. In your lesson plan, outline the objectives of the lesson plan and how the teaching method will help you achieve your objectives. Outline the activities you plan to use to implement your teaching method, with details on how and why you have these outlined activities. Yeah. So you're going to submit a PowerPoint program in Moodle, but you're also going to present on the 11th, which is basically giving you 2 weeks from now. You present in the Zoom session this particular assignment. By tomorrow, I'm also going to put up for you a rubric which will show you how I'm going to mark, so that you take key points of where your marks will need to come from. Thank you. Any question?
Yes, madam.
Yes, please.
When I just look at that question that you have posed to us,
Yes,
what
please.
would be the appropriate format of the lesson plan? Because when we can just borrow some ideas on the rest of the subjects,
Mm.
there is a format that we normally use, and of which, as of now here, we have not yet come up with a format that can lead us there. Because when I just look at outlining activities,
Okay.
one can use it to implement the teaching method.
Okay.
For
So
example, if I may look at maybe I've decided to use a topic about the computer literacy, and having stated my objectives, I would have driven maybe the objectives in terms of lesson development, and I have my activities or learning activities towards there. Then even teach the teaching methods as well. Exactly, I don't know which format should we really follow on that.
okay, now maybe what you can do, because because number one, I'm not a teacher, so I may not be familiar. What you can do, Andrew, is send me a template of how a lesson plan is. Then I'm going to reorganize, especially the rubric, in a format which can help guide you.
Okay.
Yeah. So in case you're not comfortable with PowerPoint, we can change this to a Word document.
Okay.
But yeah, but then also the question would be, then we may have to change to both a Word document and PowerPoint, because you need to make a presentation, and to make a presentation, a PowerPoint would be good. So maybe you need to have both. I would change that, the assignment, to have both a PowerPoint presentation, but then you submit a Word document.
Okay. It's fine.
Yes, please. So if you can send me a format of a lesson plan, then I can rearrange the rubric especially.
I will.
Yeah. Any other question? Are we okay?
Yes, madam,
Yes.
we're okay.
Okay, okay. So please encourage your other members to enroll in Moodle so that we can all do this as assignment. So please don't forget, if you have any question, you can send me a text, you can call me, you can send me an email, and I'll get back to you. So I wish you a good evening, everybody.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Thank you.
You're
Good
welcome.
evening.
Thank you.